I am Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And we're paranormal specialists who live in the most haunted city on earth, Savannah, Georgia. Every day is Halloween in our line of work, so join us as we spin true tales of haunts, murders, and disturbing Savannah history. I'm Madison.
I'm Chris.
And welcome to the most haunted city on earth. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the most haunted city on earth. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susie.
And I'm JT Timmons.
Yes, JT gets his own introduction because who was it that was like, JT never gets to introduce himself?
I think Corrine.
Corrine Denny.
Yes,
one of our Parajunkies. And she was like, why does JT never introduce himself? He's like the unofficial third host. And we're like...
Well, we can officially make him the third host.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be unofficial.
Yeah. Exactly.
We're gonna have to add,
it's easier with the two. I'll just be.
We're gonna have to add a ghost to the logo.
Yes, yeah. Yes. It'll be my little floating ghost next to me.
That's funny.
He's sometimes there, but sometimes
just like
not.
in the back.
Yes.
Yeah. Cool. Well, before we get started, I just want to thank a few of our newer patrons this week: Ashley Werner, Angela Linneman, Emily Barassa, Emily V, Natalie Nicole. Thank y'all so much for your support. We really, really appreciate you, and welcome to the Parajunkie family.
Yes.
For sure. Just a real quick thing, something new for Parajunkies. The exclusive voting for the Hag tier and up on Patreon, for those people, they get to control the designs in the Parajunkie secret store.
Ooh.
So if you are a Hag tier, a Gribble House tier, or a St. Julian tier, you can send me any ideas that you have, and I will create them, and you can literally get a shirt made. We just did the Oogity Boogity shirt, and which is a Parajunkie exclusive. Again, Corrine Denny recommended that one, and I put it up there. Yep, put it up there this morning. So very, very cool, and if you're not a Parajunkie, definitely consider being one, because we have a lot of fun.
Yes. Absolutely. We're always putting up new, interesting little bits and bobs over on the Parajunkie side of things. Chris and JT just did like a whole little Discord on horror movies and ghostly horror movies. So that's just one of the surface level things that we talk about. We talk about random questions that people have, different theories and things like that. So if you're looking for more of that type of style of content, definitely consider becoming a Parajunkie.
Yes. All right, let's go ahead and get started with the Q&A. Here we go. How would someone who closed themselves off to any sensitivity or abilities because of religious teachings that it's from the devil and a sin begin to embrace and open themselves back up? Lately, I have been feeling pulled towards my Irish ancestors' pagan beliefs, even though I am Christian, and I can feel my childhood sensitivity returning.
Yes, that's tricky. I get that in a lot of ways. I was raised Christian as well, and there are a lot of people who grow up in the church and they are told that, even though, in my opinion, spirituality is totally different than being religious, and I think that's the important thing to separate, because you are still a spiritual being, and if, like in my personal belief system, that we are connected to all of the things that surround us, all those different energies, all those different spirits. If you have that sensitivity, it doesn't make you any less of a Christian. It just means that you have that type of sensibility or sensitivity. So I feel like reminding yourself and allowing yourself that space, if you want to be open to it and allow yourself to engage in that ability, don't feel bad about, your religion just because you're able to see spirits or hear spirits or whatever it be. But on the side note of, feeling connected to your roots, that's really common. And I think it's especially becoming more common nowadays through social media, of people wanting to feel connected to where they came from. And it's not abnormal to want to know the practices of your ancestors and wanting to know how you can incorporate that into your spirituality. So there are plenty of people who consider themselves Christian witches in the witchcraft community, and they practice elements of paganism through, celebrating Yule or celebrating the different Sabbaths or things like that. But it doesn't change what you believe in your higher power. So
yeah, God made nature, and nature, connects people.
Absolutely.
You can find religion in nature.
Absolutely. Well, and I feel like, a lot of people who do have that religious trauma, I being one of them, I've had to work through that a lot growing up, but it's hard to allow yourself that space and just enjoy what you want to enjoy and research what you find interesting. Sure. I don't feel like there's anything up there in whatever you believe in that's going to smite you for being interested in something,
Yeah. Christopher?
It's very important to remember that organized religion is interpretation. That is why there are so many different factions in Christianity. That's why, from church to church, from congregation to congregation, that's why there are so many different types of, Baptists and Methodists and everything. It is all about this interpretation of things that they have borne witness to or that they have been taught. So knowledge becomes a part of your journey in life. And so if you want to explore and know more about your ancestors, your roots, where you come from, it will open your eyes to interpretations that other people had of events, of things that happened in nature and how they honored them and how they went about, their worship. Because worship is a concentrated effort to ally yourself with the observational spirituality around you. And that's why every region of the world has different styles and approaches of worship, is because they were having different types of a phenomenon that they would observe and they would witness and they would want to honor and make sure that, the harvest came back and make sure that these things would happen. So religion is an interpretation of all of this spiritual information. And it's not really up to us to determine which one is right and which one, it serves the purpose of enriching your soul and your spirit. So if it speaks to you, then it's probably doing its job. But if there's something that you want to explore, then you absolutely should explore it. And I honestly believe personally that knowledge is king. Knowing everything, know more, as a practicing, Christian or Muslim or anything, you should know about the other religions. You should know about the other gods. You should know about the gods that faded. You should know about the gods that are no longer, worshipped with any fervor. We called it mythology, but it was religion back in the day.
Yeah.
So recognize the fact that these truths that people accepted, and there is a boat.
Yeah, I don't know.
Right at us. I don't know if you can hear this, but
I don't know. I have compression on these microphones. But it's a weird noise.
It sounds like a boat is about to hit this building, and it's telling us to get out of the way.
Yeah, during a very serious conversation, there's just boat noises.
Boat noises.
But in any case, back to the point, I do believe that arming ourselves with knowledge of how other people interpreted the phenomena of their life gives us the opportunity to choose what speaks and resonates most with our ideology and expands our ideology, expands our knowledge base, allows us to be far more forgiving and far more accepting. I find that the walls of a church can become this fortress against new ideas and new and different cultures. So I'm always a big fan of going out and exploring. And as far as the how to do it, that's the answer is research, read, talk to people who are connected, learn from them. And you may see that it doesn't suit you, or you may see that it far better suits you than you had ever imagined.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Cool.
Absolutely.
All right. Here we go. Ashley Werner asks, do you know any spooky stories from the Girl Scouts area? And I know that Madison, you have a good one that you mentioned to me.
So it's not technically, like, it's related to Juliette Gordon-Low. It was her mother. It's the story that I personally like the best, because Nellie Gordon, she was just a fireball of a woman, and I love her for that because she's so interesting to learn about. But there's a story that comes from Juliette Gordon-Low's birthplace, which now serves as a Girl Scouts headquarters. But basically, when Nellie was passing away, her husband had died a few years prior to that, and they were just like thick as thieves kind of a couple. They loved each other so deeply, and when he died, she was very deeply affected by this, and so she actually fell ill pretty quickly after he would pass away. But when she was basically on her deathbed, she would have all the family there. Everybody was in the living room, and I believe it was the girlfriend of one of her sons.
Sister-in-law.
Or sister-in-law, yeah.
Juliette Gordon-Low's sister-in-law.
Yes. Yeah. It was the sister-in-law who was, she was like, I need to get some fresh air. So she goes outside to the front steps. Mm-hmm. And one of their servants, he was walking up the steps, and he was like, I just saw Mr. Gordon. I just saw him with my own eyes. He came up to me, he shook my hand. And what she reported is that he walked up the stairs and he said, I'm here to get Nellie.
Oh, wow.
And
Willie.
Yeah, exactly.
Willie and Nellie.
Yes, which is so cute. And he's like, I'm here to get Nellie. And right when he was said to like enter the room, that was when she passed away. And so there's some people who like to continue the story that they watched him or the couple walk down the steps and get into a ghost carriage of sorts, very
that's so
Haunted
sweet.
Mansion style. But,
Cool.
It's very romantic.
it's the most romantic ghost story.
For those of you that don't know, Savannah is the Girl Scouts headquarters.
Yes.
Yes.
It's the birthplace.
And so that's why Ashley was asking about it.
Yep.
Yeah, she said she was a former Girl Scout and wanted to know. Anything else?
So one of the interesting things about Juliette Gordon-Low that many people don't know is she loved ghost stories. She was a huge fan because she was born on Halloween. Her birthday is October 31st. And my favorite Juliette Gordon-Low story, it's not a ghost story, but it's my favorite, is that Nellie was from an affluent family in Chicago, and they were well known, and they were a influential family. General Sherman came to their house. So General Sherman, who in Georgia history was the devil, he burned this state to the ground, and as a matter of fact, they called him Old Devil Sherman. And Old Devil Sherman shows up at their house, and I'm going to say that Juliette Gordon-Low is like 5 years old at this time, and he's sitting in the house, and she climbs up on Sherman's lap, just like out of the blue, very precocious child, and starts rubbing his head furiously. And so Nellie's like pulling this girl off of this general's body, and she's like, "What are you doing?" And she was looking for horns. She was looking for horns on Old Devil Sherman, and I was like, "That's such a good story."
That is
I just
so
love
good.
that
She
story.
is her mother's daughter for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Honestly, we could do like a whole episode on Nellie Gordon. I just love her as like a historical figure.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
But
was it Nellie Gordon's mother who was taken by indigenous peoples and lived with them for a period of time? Windful of Sails was her native name, her indigenous name, and they released her back.
Yep.
Yeah, and she came back. She had lived with the indigenous people for a while and came back, and I was like, that family is amazing. That story is incredible.
It is.
That is.
But yeah, the Andrew Lowe house is, if you go into the courtyard, that's where the first Girl Scout meeting was held. It's Andrew Lowe house is where Juliette Gordon Lowe would pass away. She passed away if you go to the upstairs, it's the second bedroom on the right-hand side. And she was sitting next to the window in a chair. And I was like, that's very cinematic, the way she passed away.
Yeah, if you go, because the carriage house like situation was where the Girl Scouts started, and famously Julia Gordon Lowe made a phone call and was like, I have an idea. It's going to help the girls of Savannah and the world. And it's and she was absolutely right.
She was. I was a Girl Scout up into cadets, which I believe is early teenage years. So I loved Julia Gordon Lowe. But just an interesting family for sure. And their haunted story is, of course, the most romantic story in Savannah's history.
Cool. All right. Nat Nelson. Hey, we just got a new Patreon. Thanks, Megan Baker. A new Parajunkie. I just saw Patreon. A new Parajunkie. Thanks, Megan Baker. We appreciate you. Welcome to the Parajunkie family.
Woohoo.
All right. Nat Nelson asks, are there types of places where you rarely or never see any ghosts? Just wondering what their kryptonite is. Thanks.
She's like, just for personal use, I just want to know. But
so that's intriguing, because what you'll oftentimes find is most people will say that churches are generally not that haunted.
Asheville would say otherwise.
They would.
On a whole,
yeah,
there's going to be haunted churches, absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
And generally those churches have some dark history to them, is how they got that way, or there was something so specific to cause that haunting. But as a general rule of thumb, you find that churches don't necessarily have ghosts, mostly because of perception, because we're raised to think that is a holy place and a place where ghosts don't belong. And that's generally the field. There's no place that is impervious to ghosts, but I found that places where people feel most spiritually secure and most safe are oftentimes barred from ghosts, not because they have special kryptonite, but because it's just an accepted rule. And a lot of ghosts follow the rules. That's kind of a part of it, is they kind of, because they lived knowing the rules. If you tell people don't misbehave here, that rule sticks when you die and come back as a ghost. So you generally don't have that kind of interaction going on often. I can think of a lot of ghost stories that happen in churches, but they're generally not a hyper haunted location.
Sure.
Another one that people love to say is cemeteries. People love saying, they're like, cemeteries aren't haunted, and I'm like, come to Savannah. But it's
a different kind of thing.
Exactly.
Because the hauntings of a cemetery are about where spirits are laid to rest. So to say they're not haunted is a misnomer. To say they're not active is probably a better way to say it, because the spirits are there. They're just, they accept, again, the rule. The rule was, in life we were told, and we talk about this with children ghosts a lot, because children don't get the rules. They don't live a life of ritual or going to funerals or going to these things. After death, the rules that we learn in life and we take into death oftentimes result in us behaving in a certain pattern. Like a haunted cemetery, oftentimes... I always think of that movie, Frighteners, where all the ghosts are just standing around in the cemetery because they know that's where they belong. That's where they were told, oh, well, my name's on this stone, so I'll just stand by the stone.
Yeah.
It's true. But there are some church cemeteries specifically that will specifically lay out saying this is not haunted. And it does, set out an intention of saying okay, well, I'm obviously not welcome here. Like the cemetery in Pawleys Island that we went to.
Yep.
They have this sign that I was just appalled by because basically, we went there because they have one of the most famous ghosts in South Carolina history. and her grave is there. Her name's Alice, and she died from basically a broken heart because she was torn away from her lover and things like that. But her grave is there, and they have a sign on the cemetery entrance that says, "The only ghost welcome here is the Holy Ghost." And I was like,
They do.
That is so
They do. I saw it. I was like,
intense.
whoa. You can find it on Google, too.
You can.
literally Google it.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, isn't that just comical? Because of course, this is the cemetery that would have one of the more active ghosts because she steals rings from women because she's looking for her ring that her mother took away from her and things like that. You know,
and there's a lot of cemeteries that have like weird occurrences around them. I want to say there's a cemetery in North Georgia that they call Hell's Gate. You know that they believe there's a portal to hell in the cemetery. Actually, now that I think about it, some of my scariest encounters happened in cemeteries. There's a place in Fort Riley, Kansas, called the Off Post Chapel, which has a cemetery behind it that was devastatingly frightening. And there was there was a cemetery in Lawrence, Kansas. If anybody's out there in Lawrence, Kansas, there was a Stairway to Hell story in Lawrence, Kansas. At least this was in the early 90s.
Is it Lawrenceville, Kansas?
No, it's Lawrence.
It's Lawrence. Okay. Maybe, I'm thinking Lawrenceville, Georgia. That's
they're very well could be Lawrenceville in Kansas as well.
No, I don't know. Well, I kind of think planes probably are safe. No,
because
like when I think of I don't know, high speed travel doesn't scream ghost to me.
But here's the thing: is that like spirits do not operate on our same level of existence. Like going up to 500 miles per hour isn't going to do anything to a ghost that's attached to a person or a spirit that's attached to the plane itself, because plane crashes do happen and people die on planes and people are carted in planes, like bodies are carted in planes.
Sorry, there is no kryptonite.
Yeah, there's no safe spot
unless you don't believe, like you just reject them.
Well, yeah, I mean they're not going to waste their energy on you.
They're not going to waste their
energy.
Chance. Absolutely, and there are because there are as many unhaunted places, if not more, than haunted. It's such that's a confusing question because it's about activity. Are things high in activity or low in activity? And on the lower scale, you have places that are not welcoming.
Sure.
That are like keep your ghost to yourself.
Yeah. Awesome. Alrighty. Trent 1903 asks, can using the GhostTube app have the same negative results as a Ouija board?
I mean, I have gotten some interesting things. I feel like it's a tool. And obviously you should follow it up with further research and follow
There's nothing. I've tried.
Well, because it's you, Jay. You are like the worst person to hold ghost hunting equipment.
The construct of using a tool in any case is about opening your observation. So if you're shutting it down anyway, you're not going to find anything. That is not how it works. That's not how any tool works. You use a tool to enhance your ability, not to prove something, to get something. That is not the purpose of any investigative tool. It's not to capture something. It is to give you footholds that you can then reliably move forward on. And that's a problem with anything that you use. And the difference between like the GhostTube app versus like the Ouija board. The Ouija board is asking you for personal energy. It's asking you to directly interact. Whereas the GhostTube app or any of the spirit boxes, any of these mechanical tools are environmentally affected. So they go through a process. And yeah, the GhostTube app, you can easily chalk it to, well, it's just designed to rattle off words. It's like, that's fair, but we did use it and pulled it close to a microphone, so we know that it's using a magnetic spectrogram. It is definitely sensing magnetic fields. It is doing these things. And conceptually, if it is reacting and interpreting and then spilling out words, because we also know that it has a library of words. It's not it's not making words, unless you're using the one that's just a spirit box, because there is a version that is sweeping through radio channels and spitting up things, and that's where we got
Atwell. Yeah.
And that's where we got names that seem to lead to places. So, first off, the further removed you are from physically interacting with the tool, the safer you are from the kind of thing that people talk about with Ouija boards.
Yeah.
A Ouija board is direct communication. It is relying on you physically moving. By the way, you are physically moving the placard. Don't get into that mindset that the ghost is moving the placard. It's you. You have to make the figure 8. You have to do it. And then you're allowing your sensations and your personal influence to move the placard to the letters and to the words. The closer you are to the action of communication, the closer you are to a spirit. And of course, a Ouija board itself is so innocuous that it can be a dark spirit. It can be a dangerous spirit versus a spirit box or anything like that, which is basically just reading the environment and spitting out things that then, as the investigator, you have to start to interpret. You have to start to put it together like a puzzle. So, I would say any tool that you're using, you should think of it as getting a puzzle piece and then trying to figure out what the picture is from the puzzle piece.
Yeah.
So I've had these weird dreams happening where I end up in attics and I experience a spirit there. Or the most recent one, I was tortured in an attic and then I was taken out to the backyard and like left there to just sit essentially. And the house was like empty at that point. So
It was our backyard?
Yes, our backyard. And then the day after I had that dream, we found what we think might be a bone in our backyard. JT dug it up himself. He was there.
I was putting a patio in.
Yes, and we found, I kid you not, and like we can insert a photo because I would honestly, if any of you are doctors or nurses or morticians, whatever, people who work with dead bodies, I would love to see what people think of it because it's just an odd coincidence with the series of things that I've been getting.
Yeah.
And where we live, it also, Chris and I have on side tangents, like off camera, talked about it wasn't uncommon for people to get buried in their backyards.
Certainly not on Jones Street.
Yeah.
Really hope I didn't dig somebody up.
Well,
I really hope I didn't.
Well, and that
it's
was
small
like
bone.
a very
It is
piece.
a small bone.
It's
a piece.
It looked broken. So, like, if you look at the bone, the way it is it looks like a joint bone because it's smooth on the top. But it looks towards the bottom of it. It looks like it was snapped or something.
Yeah.
Because it's got these sharp ridges at the bottom, and so it looks like it's a piece of a bigger bone of sorts. But very interesting nonetheless, and
like
very
an
much
ulna.
so a weird. Exactly. It's a very weird coincidence. After having all these dreams about being killed inside of our house, so
Yeah. No. I mean,
I plan to go research this further.
I believe
so
everything you said other than the ghost tube stuff. Absolutely.
I'm just saying, I
they
find
do
it
things like okay, we were out on the kayak and what did it say? It was like hell.
No, it didn't say that.
What did it say?
It said like something. Hold on, I can tell you. If you grab my phone over there, Jay, I will tell you exactly what it said. But basically, I pull it out every once in a while just to see, because we were out on Ebenezer Creek where thousands of people were
Literally thousands.
massacred.
Don't tell too much of it because I actually have a Parajunkie exclusive plan just to talk about Ebenezer Creek massacre.
There is
because it's very sad.
And there's a house not
story.
far from there that I've been asked about on several occasions, where I believe the mother is in prison for killing the child, and they think it's a ghost that killed the child.
Wow.
Ooh.
So we're going to talk more about that in the Parajunkie exclusive because there's a lot there. It's a super, 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 super important story that actually not a ton of people know. And it's super disturbing and very sad. So we're gonna that's planned for Sunday. Let's see. Anne Marie Morales, hello again, asks, will a ghost hunt / tour make you more susceptible to a spirit following you home, or will they attach to you anywhere and everywhere?
I would agree on the latter half of that question with they kind of are just, if they're going to attach to you, they're going to attach to you regardless of whether or not you're on a tour or things like that. Typically, when you do like a ghost hunt or you do a ghost tour, you're actively putting the intention in that you're trying to interact, which I wouldn't say makes you more susceptible, but you're at least, putting yourself in a concentrated place. But in the terms of like things attaching to you, it's not as common as you would think. People have to give off something that spirit wants, or, give off something that attracts that spirit in general. So if you give that off and you're just walking down the street and that spirit notices it, you don't need to be doing a ghost hunt for it to be like, hello, I'm here, things like that. But I think it's really why you hear people like have more visceral experiences is because of the intention of wanting to interact, less so than, that just putting on a beacon of light and saying, attach to me, Yeah,
well, and it's interesting because I think that the act of listening to ghost stories and of being in an environment where you're basically becoming more and more open to the concept and open to the idea. And that's kind of the practice of telling ghost stories is broadening your internal horizon, the concept, which would make you a little more attractive to a ghost. Because if you're closed off, the spirit may not want to have anything to do with you. But if you're actively pursuing ghost stories, if you're actively in a place where you're being affected by ghost stories, that means that your mind is opening to the prospect of ghosts, which could be something that attracts a ghost to you. So whenever you go ghost hunting, whenever you go looking for ghosts, you are actively participating in trying to experience it, which gives the ghost a little assurance that if they attempt to contact you or connect with you, that you'd be open to that connection, because they don't want to waste their energy on somebody that's closed. And I've been on plenty of ghost hunts where the skeptic of the group is so very closed that access seems impossible. That it would seem very strange. I've even been on a ghost hunt with a man who is very, very skeptical and very, very, and he got scratched on the arm, like a deep scratch on his arm, and his response was, I got scratched, and it was just like, okay, let me see it, and it's the classic 3 scratch mark, and I was like, oh, that's not good, and he's like, meh. And it's like, well, what do you think could have scratched you? And the long conversation was just kind of like he was not having any of it. He was like, it happens. You get scratched. I'm like, okay. He was like, I could have been scratched at home. And I'm like, really? You didn't notice this deep scratches on your arm? And he's like, meh. And it's like, well, that ghost probably went home disappointed.
Yes, absolutely.
Like, I got that guy.
No. Gosh, that's... People like that, I find it so funny because it's very rare actually for a skeptic of that nature when they have an experience. Usually they're like, their whole like perspective gets shifted, because I've had that happen on tours where the staunch skeptic gets this crazy photo and they're like, oh no, you must have done something to my phone. And I'm like, no, I am not technologically savvy, nor do I get paid enough to actually do that.
So what kind of equipment do you think we have?
Exactly. So I always think it's interesting to hear, a skeptic just be like, meh, whatever.
I absolutely love a skeptic who is unaffected, because it's not that they're staunch skeptics, so they're like, their point is being skeptic. It's just, it doesn't matter to them. It's like, don't you want to see something special? He's like, yeah, if something shows up, if something's going to show up, I'll look at it. And it's like, oh, okay.
I mean, that's a different type of conviction, so I can't argue with it.
All right, let's go ahead and move on. So Emery Morales actually sent a 2-parter in. Part 1, do you believe there are places where energy will constantly churn up activity that no amount of cleansing can fully rid of? In part 2, saw it on TV that it had something to do with tectonic plates or magnetic pull in that spot.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And a lot of people will argue that about Savannah, that there's a low-lying magnetic field around Savannah that is very responsible for the kinds of hauntings and the kinds of persistent hauntings that happen here. Yes, to disregard the idea of natural laying magnetic lines or unnatural ones where power lines converge, where faults are. I would have to say that there's going to be places where the energy is so easily digestible by spirits, that you're never going to find a way to counter the types of hauntings. But in those instances, oftentimes you can single out spirits and help the specific spirit find its release or its path. But the actual ongoing nature of the space will always draw more spirits. There will always be spirits coming. I know that I've heard of places where heavy quartz under the
That's what I was
ground,
gonna say.
limestone you had mentioned before, where there are large mineral deposits under the ground that can cause electromagnetic sorts of patterns. Yeah, I think spirits the supernatural will be drawn to it.
Absolutely. And here's our Bloody Mackenzie moment of the episode. In the sense of just like power and electricity and things like that. One of the reasons why people believe that he is such a charged kind of spirit and why he's so powerful is because right behind his mausoleum is this massive power surger.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And so they're like, well,
yeah, I remember that.
Yeah, well, because it's like, of course that's going to be something he's already a very powerful spirit, very powerful poltergeist, but when you have an endless supply of
unlimited
energy
food
right behind his mausoleum, it makes sense that he would be like the supercharged poltergeist.
Yeah, I had a ghost hunting friend who was big on look for the transformer boxes. How close are we? What is the electric situation? Because electricity is a very easily adaptable spiritual energy, and you hear it all the time, batteries being drained. I've often said that theaters are oftentimes haunted because of the sheer volume of electric lights that they have all strung up. So there's all of this wiring and all of this very powerful, potent lighting. So yeah, I definitely think that environment is a key to a lot of, especially nondescript haunting.
And one last part of that is that doesn't negate the level of trauma or experiences that occur in a place. So like a place like Savannah that's just been battered down for its entire existence by history, just through like all the horrible things that have happened here with diseases and murders to, suicides and all these different things that happen. It's a very condensed area as well. So it's, that's not to say that doesn't have a hand in it, or places like the asylum up in West Virginia, Transaligony. That one, there's a lot of activity there too, and I think it's just because, in the same goes with most mental asylums, that was a lot of torture that was going on to those patients that would output a lot of energy. So I feel like that also goes hand in hand with the electricity thing, and I just wanted to clarify that as well, that it's not just one or the other.
Right.
Gotcha. All right. Chris talks frequently of how you're not at the helm while sleeping, but are you as susceptible to anything paranormal while lucid dreaming?
So actually, lucid dreaming is very close to astral projection. It is being in, and the helm that I speak of when I talk about that is the physical, not being at the helm of your physical self. And so lucid dreaming is akin to astral projection. And yeah, I think that the luck that you have is you still have like maybe a foot in the conscious world that will help protect you if something is going on physically in because I find that lucid dreamers are also light sleeping. It's easy to be pulled out of lucid dreaming because you're closer to the conscious level, but it does make you attractive, I think, because what you're doing is you're actively exploring the subconscious world, and that does seem to suggest that your attention is in a subconscious, possibly alternate plane. But those are so hard to typify. Everything I say is kind of like theories. It's like this is how it looks and appears. So I would say yes, absolutely. But I do know that these are loose interpretations of observation. It's not. I don't have a book that will verify these facts.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like everybody's lucid dreaming is different. So, but one thing that makes me weary about lucid dreaming is that, one, because you are more susceptible to paranormal activity with a less heightened ability to fight back against it. But the other thing is that it feels almost like it's a place where we're not supposed to be. There was a trend that went on TikTok. I don't know if this popped up on your For You page, Chris, but there was this person who was like, next time you have a lucid dream, ask somebody in your dream what day and what time it is.
Oh, no. Don't
yeah.
do that.
And I literally was like, no, because that's tapping into something that's just not in our realm, that we're not supposed to know that sort of stuff. But this girl did it. And she talked about her experience, and it was kind of frightening because she had a lucid dream and she was in this diner. And she asked the waitress, she was like, what day and what time is it? And the waitress in her dream like snapped out of this character and was like, you're one of those. And she's like, you're not supposed to talk about that here. You're not supposed to ask those questions. And she was like, okay, that's weird. And then she goes and asks another person, and everybody in this diner just got up and started staring at her at the same time, because they're like, you're not supposed to know these things. You need to leave. Like, you can't come back here because you're not supposed to know this type of stuff. You can't ask questions because I think the point of lucid dreaming is supposed to allow people to learn things in a deeper way. But when you go too far into being fully aware of where you are and able to ask questions and control what you're saying, that's where it gets dangerous. And it felt like those were the spirits or the elements of her mind that were like, you're now in danger.
Right,
yeah,
absolutely.
Exactly. That were like, you need to stop now. You need to go back. Like,
you walked right up to the gate, because it's a very peculiar thing. Because they say things like, in the dream world, you're not supposed to be able to read. Like, if you look at a book, you're not supposed to be able to read. You're not supposed to be able to do these things, and a lot of that has to do with anchors, the anchors of the subconscious and the anchors of the dreamland, we'll call it, are that you can't connect, because if you were to connect, you may never wake up. If you were to stay there, you would assume the life that you're living was in that realm and not this one. And so, because that's the type of story that I've heard many times, and it plays out in a lot of different folklore, because there's a lot of folklore about people who sleep for Rip Van Winkle and Urishi Mataro and all these stories where in the dream world you're dealing with, for no other word, the Fae. And if you are in their realm and they recognize you, you're trapped. You don't get out. And that results in lengthy sleeps, the 100-year sleep, the 20-year sleep, where you're living out a life, enslaved or otherwise. So yeah, it's tricky, because we have so many examples of why that's a bad idea without real knowledge. We have like stories that seem to suggest that if you were to access a way to stay in the sleeping, dreaming world, you would never come back to the waking world. You would never live out your life. So yeah, be wary. Yeah. I guess is the answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, if you naturally have lucid dreams or whatever, that's definitely an ability for you. But I don't like when people actively say, like, I'm going to try to lucid dream, or like, this is how you lucid dream. I'm like, that feels like we're stepping into something that we're not supposed to, unless it comes naturally to you. Because the people who it comes natural to, it feels like they are well equipped in whatever it is, the reason why they're able to lucid dream, that it's safer.
Right.
So just my opinion, though, on lucid dreaming. So, but thank you guys for sending in some really great questions. You always do. You always come through with the very interesting, very intricate questions. But if you do want to answer or ask a question that you want to hear us answer during a Q&A session, utilize the TikTok feature on our TikTok called Haunted City Podcast. And then also make sure to follow us on our new Instagram, the most haunted city on earth. If you want to become a Parajunkie, you can find us over on Patreon. And then, of course, if you would like to get some merch, we do have that on hauntedcitypodcast.com. But with that, y'all, thank you so much again for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. My name is Madison Timmons.
I'm Chris Susi.
And stay spooky, y'all.
And JT's over there.
And JT is over there.